The wind at FOB Kestrel's perch had teeth. It gnawed at the seams of the canvas tents and screamed through the narrow gaps between stacked shipping containers. Sergeant Anya Sharma felt it not as an inconvenience, but as a constant ambient pressure, a reminder of where she was. 12,000 feet up a desolate mountain spine, a place where the air was thin and mistakes were measured in frozen degrees. She moved with an economy that bordered on invisibility, directing the two grumbling privates wrestling a pallet of cold-weather rations off the back of a transport truck. Her voice was low, barely audible over the gale, yet her instructions were followed without question. Left side, chin. Watch the balance. Diaz, secure the straps before you lift. Each word was a tool, used precisely and put away. From the raised platform of the makeshift command post, a plywood and metal shack overlooking the landing zone, Captain Marcus Thorne watched her. He saw a woman of medium height, her frame lost in the bulk of an army-issue parka, her face obscured by a fleece gaiter and goggles. All he could truly discern was the quiet efficiency, and he despised it. Felt like a judgment. He preferred the loud, grunting certainty of his infantrymen, the performative masculinity that defined his leadership style. Sharma was an anomaly, a logistics NCO who moved like a predator but was tasked with counting blankets. "Look at her," Thorne muttered to Corporal Evans, his de facto second-in-command. Quartermaster's clerk, playing soldier. Bet she's never spent a night outside a heated tent. Evans, a young man whose swagger was borrowed directly from his captain, snorted in agreement. Probably put in a requisition for heated toilet seats, sir. Thorne's lips curled into a smirk. He strode down the rickety steps, his boots thudding with deliberate importance. He intercepted Sharma just as the last pallet was being lowered. "Sergeant," he began, his voice a theatrical boom designed to carry over the wind. "I count 7 pallets. The manifest I signed this morning said 8. Care to explain the discrepancy?" Sharma didn't look up from her datapad. She swiped a gloved finger across the screen. "The 8th pallet, sir, containing the supplemental high-altitude gear, was rerouted to FOB Griffin by your order at 0600. You required the transport space for your personal footlockers." She finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes, visible above the gaiter, were a flat, calm brown. There was no accusation in them, merely a statement of fact. Thorne's face tightened. He had forgotten. The correction, delivered so plainly and publicly, felt like an open challenge to his authority. The privates, Diaz and Chen, studiously avoided looking at him, their sudden interest in a loose strap on the pallet all-consuming. "See that the gear is stowed correctly," Thorne snapped, turning his back on her. "And I want a full inventory of the entire supply depot on my desk by 2000 hours. Every single protein bar and every last pair of socks." "Understood." "Understood, sir," Sharma said to his retreating back. The wind whipped the word away, but she knew he'd heard it. She turned back to the pallet. The work continued. Her movements remained unchanged. Precise, efficient, and utterly devoid of wasted energy. She was a cog in a machine, a function. But the wind, as it howled past, seemed to whisper a warning that the machine was about to break. The briefing room was a cramped, frigid container smelling of stale coffee and damp wool. A single flickering fluorescent tube cast long, dancing shadows on the faces of the assembled squad. Captain Thorne stood before a topographical map of the region. A red line snaking its way up to a formidable peak marked the Serpent's Tooth. "High-altitude reconnaissance," Thorne announced, slapping the map for emphasis. "Command wants eyes on the pass before the next weather cycle moves in. We go in 24 hours. Evans, you have point. Diaz, Chen, you're on his fire team. Standard loadout." Sergeant Sharma stood at the back of the container, a silent observer as required by her role. She held a datapad, her thumb scrolling through meteorological data feeds. The lines on the screen were telling a different story than the one Thorne was projecting. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the captain's monologue. Thorne paused, his jaw clenching. He turned slowly, an actor annoyed by a disruption from the audience. What is it, Sergeant? The barometric pressure is dropping at a rate of 38 millibars per hour. The latest satellite thermal imaging shows a significant temperature inversion forming over the eastern ridge. All indicators point to a cyclonic event developing within the next 18 hours, not 24. The storm will be faster and more severe than forecast. Thorne crossed his arms, a picture of condescending patience. Is that so? We have a meteorologist in our midst. A few of the men chuckled. Sharma did not react. Furthermore, sir, she continued, her tone unchanging, the standard issue MREs have a caloric value of approximately 2,500 calories. At the projected altitude and temperature, your men will be burning closer to 6,000 calories per day. They'll be in a severe caloric deficit within 10 hours of leaving the wire. It will impair cognitive function and accelerate the onset of hypothermia. Thorne walked slowly toward her until he was standing directly in front of her, forcing her to look up at him. Sergeant, he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. Your job is to count the beans, not to tell me how to eat them. Your job is to stack the boxes, not to predict the weather. Are we clear? My job, sir, is to ensure this unit is properly supplied and equipped for its operational requirements. A patrol walking into a blizzard with inadequate rations does not meet that standard. The air in the container grew thick and heavy. The silence was broken only by the hum of the light and the ceaseless moan of the wind outside. Thorne stared at her, his eyes narrowed, searching for a flicker of fear, a hint of insubordination. He found nothing but a calm, steady gaze. You are dismissed, Sergeant, he finally said, his voice dangerously soft. And since you have so much time on your hands for weather reports and dietary planning, you can spend the rest of the day reorganizing the entire supply tent. I want it perfect. Every label facing out. Every box aligned. To Z. Go. Sharma gave a short, correct nod. Yes, sir. She turned and walked out of the briefing, her back straight, her stride measured. The supply tent was a cavernous canvas structure, a tomb of crates and boxes. The cold inside was even more biting than it was outside, the air still and heavy. Sharma worked under the light of a single bare bulb, her breath pluming in the frigid air. She moved with the same methodical grace she applied to everything, lifting heavy boxes as if they were weightless, her mind sorting and categorizing, finding order in the chaos. Hours passed. The sky outside darkened from a slate gray to a deep, bruised purple. The wind's howl intensified, a constant, shrieking lament. She was cataloging medical supplies when the tent flap was thrown open, letting in a swirl of snow and a blast of Arctic air. It was Captain Thorne, flanked by Evans and Diaz. He was holding a large, galvanized steel bucket. Still at it, Sergeant? Thorne asked, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Thought you might be getting a little too comfortable in here. We can't have our logistics staff going soft. Sharma stopped what she was doing and stood, her posture neutral. Out here, Thorne continued, his voice full of false bonhomie, you have to acclimate. You have to embrace the cold. It's a rite of passage. He took a step forward. Evans and Diaz shuffled uncomfortably, their earlier amusement replaced by a dawning sense of unease. This felt different. This was not just mockery. It was a violation. Before Sharma could react, Thorne upended the bucket. A cascade of impossibly cold, icy meltwater crashed over her head. The shock was a physical blow, a stunning, brutal impact that stole her breath. It plastered her hair to her skull, streamed down her face, and soaked through her fleece and thermal layers in an instant. A frigid violation that reached her skin and leached the heat from her core. For a split second, the world went silent, the roar of the wind replaced by the roar in her own ears. Water dripped from her chin onto the frozen ground, instantly turning to ice. The two junior soldiers stared, their snickers dying in their throats. They had expected a joke, a prank. This was something else entirely. It was an act of profound humiliation, of deliberate cruelty. Sharma stood perfectly still. She didn't shiver. She didn't gasp. She simply stood there, water dripping from the ends of her eyelashes, her face a blank, unreadable mask. Thorne watched her, his smile faltering slightly, waiting for the tears, the anger, the outburst. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to break her composure. He got one. It happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. She took one short, perfectly balanced step forward, closing the distance between them. Her left hand came up, not to strike, but to gently cup the back of his neck, as if steadying him. Her right hand, open-palmed, moved in a short, blurringly fast arc. It wasn't a punch. It was a palm-heel strike, a precise application of physics, delivered with the full, leveraged force of her body weight, connecting squarely with the point of his chin. There was a sickening, wet crack. Thorne's head snapped back, his eyes rolling up into his skull. His body went limp, all 200 pounds of alpha male arrogance turned to dead weight. He collapsed backward, a puppet with its strings cut, and hit the hard-packed floor of the tent with a heavy, final thud. He was out cold before he even started to fall. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence, save for the wind. Evans and Diaz stared, their mouths agape, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet, overlooked logistics sergeant had just felled their captain with a single, effortless blow. Sharma took a small step back. She brought her right hand up, flexing the fingers slowly, as if testing them. Then she looked at the two stunned soldiers, her gaze as cold and hard as the ice forming on her uniform. "Get the medic," she said, her voice a low, steady rasp. "And tell the major the captain had an accident." The accident landed Sergeant Anya Sharma under arrest. She wasn't thrown in a brig. FOB Kestrel's perch was too primitive for such luxuries. Instead, she was confined to a windowless, steel shipping container designated for hazardous material storage. It was empty, save for a single cot and a chemical toilet. The heavy steel doors were locked from the outside, the thick metal muffling the ever-present shriek of the wind to a distant, mournful hum. Major Davies, the FOB's commander, was a man caught between protocol and pragmatism. He had a captain with a hairline fracture in his jaw, a concussion, and a spectacularly bruised ego, and a sergeant who, by all accounts, had committed a blatant act of assault against a superior officer. A court-martial was inevitable, and yet the reports from Evans and Diaz were unsettlingly consistent. They spoke of the bucket of ice water, of the captain's goading, of Sharma's impossible calm before the single, decisive strike. Davies had also taken a second look at Sharma's file. It was a study in redaction. Black bars obscured entire sections. Her service history prior to her logistics assignment was a ghost. He saw commendations with the citations blacked out, and a medical discharge for injuries sustained in a non-combat-related training incident that had taken her out of commission for nearly 2 years. It didn't add up. While Davies wrestled with the paperwork and Thorne nursed his jaw in his quarters, the sky turned a malevolent shade of gray. The wind, which had been a constant howl, escalated into a physical, violent force. Snow began to fall, not in gentle flakes, but in a horizontal, blinding sheet. The storm Sharma had predicted had arrived, not in 18 hours, but in 12. It was a whiteout, a churning vortex of wind and ice that reduced visibility to zero and plunged the temperature into a realm where exposed skin would freeze in under a minute. And Captain Thorne's reconnaissance patrol was out in it. He had sent them out just before the incident, dismissing Sharma's warnings with a final, arrogant wave of his hand. For men, Sergeant Miller's team, sent to scout the approach to the Serpent's Tooth. They had checked in an hour after departure, their signal already crackling with static. Then, nothing. Silence. Panic, cold and sharp, began to seep through the command post. The radio operator tried hailing Miller's team every 5 minutes, his calls swallowed by the storm's roar. "Kestrel base to Viper 1, do you copy?" Over only static answered, a hiss that sounded like the mountain itself laughing at them. Major Davies stood over the topographical map, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. They were out there, somewhere in that maelstrom. Their standard issue gear was rated for cold, But not for this. This was a polar vortex, a killer storm. Their tents would be shredded, their radios frozen, their bodies losing heat at a catastrophic rate. They had, at best, a few hours before they started to die. "Get me a rescue team ready," Davies barked, his voice tight with desperation. The base's executive officer, a young lieutenant, shook his head. "Sir, we can't. The wind speed is over 80 knots. We can't get a bird in the air, and visibility is less than a meter. Sending another team out on foot would be suicide. We just lose them, too." The logic was sound. It was also a death sentence for Miller's team. Davies ran a hand over his face, the stubble rasping against his palm. He was out of options. Standard operating procedure had failed. His aggressive, academy-trained captain was incapacitated by his own hubris. His men were going to freeze to death on a mountain because of it. And the one person who had seen it coming, the one person who had warned them, was locked in a steel box. The thought struck him with the force of a physical blow. He looked at the redacted file on his desk, then at the storm raging outside. Protocol be damned. Davies grabbed his parka and stormed out of the command post, leaning into a wind that felt solid enough to hold him up. He fought his way across the compound to the hazardous materials container, the snow stinging his face like needles. He fumbled with the frozen lock, his fingers numb and clumsy. Finally, it gave way. He pulled the heavy door open. A vortex of snow swirled into the dark interior. Sharma was sitting on the edge of the cot, not shivering, not pacing. She was perfectly still, her posture erect, as if she were simply waiting. In the dim light, she looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Sergeant," Davies said, his voice strained over the storm's fury. "I have a problem." Sharma's eyes held his. She didn't speak. She just waited. "Miller's team is out there," he shouted. "Thorne sent them out before the incident. We've lost contact. The storm, it's exactly what you said it would be." He paused, the admission hanging in the frozen air between them. It was a confession of failure, an acknowledgement of her superior judgment. "We can't get a rescue team to them. It's impossible. They're going to die." Sharma's gaze didn't waver. She seemed to be weighing him, measuring his desperation. "I've read your file, what little of it isn't blacked out," Davies continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know who you were before you became a logistics NCO, but I know you're more than what you seem. I'm asking for your help." For the first time, Sharma's expression shifted. A flicker of something, not surprise but perhaps consideration, passed through her eyes. "You're asking the prisoner you have slated for a court-martial to lead a suicide mission," she stated, her voice flat and even. "I'm asking the only person on this base who might have a chance," Davies countered, his desperation overriding all other concerns. "I will take full responsibility. Whatever you need. Whatever you want." Sharma stood up. She was shorter than him, but in the confines of the steel box, she seemed to fill the space. The calm she projected was more intimidating than Thorne's loudest shouts had ever been. "My terms," she said, and her voice was no longer that of a logistics sergeant. It was the voice of command, sharp and absolute. 1. I have full operational authority. No one questions my orders. No one. Not even you. 2. I get access to everything in the experimental gear locker. Crate 7B. The one Captain Thorne kept under personal lock and key. 3. I pick my team. Davies didn't hesitate. Done. Who do you want? A faint, mirthless smile touched the corner of Sharma's mouth. Give me the ones who laughed, she said. Give me Evans, Diaz, and Chun. The transformation was immediate and absolute. The moment Sharma stepped out of the container, the quiet, overlooked logistics NCO vanished. In her place was an operator, a creature of purpose and chilling competence. She moved not with the hurried energy of desperation, but with a focused, predatory grace. Evans, Diaz, and Chun were summoned from their barracks, their faces a mixture of confusion and dread. They found Sharma in the supply tent, her domain. standing before a large, locked steel crate marked 7B, High Altitude Experimental. Major, she said, not looking at Davies who stood behind her. The bolt cutters. Davies produced them without a word. With 2 sharp snaps, the lock was broken. Sharma threw open the lid. Inside, nestled in foam, was equipment the 3 young soldiers had never seen before. It looked like something from a science fiction film. Ultralight, exoskeletal snowshoes. Low-profile thermal suits that shimmered faintly under the bare bulb. Compact oxygen regulators and masks. High-caloric nutrient paste in silver tubes. And a portable signals booster with a complex, collapsible antenna array. This was the gear she had requisitioned, the gear Thorne had dismissed as unnecessary and locked away. "Strip," she commanded. The 3 soldiers stared at her. "Now, down to your base layer. Everything you are wearing is standard issue garbage. It's heavy, it absorbs moisture, and it will kill you. Move." Her voice was a blade. The swaggering bravado they carried like a second skin dissolved. They stripped quickly, their movements clumsy in the face of her intensity. She tossed them the shimmering thermal suits. "Put these on. There are no seams. The material regulates heat and wicks moisture at a molecular level. It's lighter and warmer than anything you've ever worn." She demonstrated how to seal the wrists and ankles, her hands moving with the practiced precision of a surgeon. "Your body is a furnace. We are not letting a single calorie of heat escape." She handed them the rations. "Forget MREs. We're not stopping to cook. One of these tubes contains 4,000 calories of lipids, protein, and fast-acting carbohydrates. You will consume one every 4 hours as I command. It will taste like chalk, but it will keep you alive." She showed them how to strap on the strange snowshoes, which articulated with their boots, distributing their weight perfectly. She adjusted Diaz's pack, pulling the straps tight with a series of sharp, efficient tugs. He flinched at her proximity. "Your pack is part of you," she said, her voice low and close to his ear. "If it's loose, you waste energy with every step. Energy is life. Do not waste it." She looked at the 3 of them, their faces pale with a new kind of fear. Not fear of the storm, but fear of her. Their mockery, their snide jokes, seemed like relics from another lifetime. This woman was not a clerk. She was something else entirely. "Out here," she said, her eyes sweeping over them, "the mountain decides who lives. The wind, the cold, the altitude, they are the enemy. They do not care how strong you are. They care how smart you are. You will listen to every word I say. You will do exactly as I command. You will match my pace. You will control your breathing. If you fall behind, I will leave you. Is that understood?" 3 sharp, terrified nods were her answer. "Good," she said, pulling her own thermal mask over her face. Only her eyes were visible, hard and bright. "Let's go for a walk." Stepping out of the relative calm of the tent was like stepping into another dimension. The world was gone, replaced by a screaming white void. The wind was a solid wall, a physical entity that shoved and clawed at them, trying to rip the packs from their backs and the breath from their lungs. Snow, hard as sand, scoured any exposed skin. It was impossible to see, impossible to hear anything but the storm's deafening roar. Sharma leaned into the gale, a small, dark shape against the infinite white. She didn't fight it. She moved with it, her body angled, her steps sure and planted with the aid of the advanced snowshoes. She set a relentless, rhythmic pace. It wasn't fast, but it was constant, a human metronome against the chaos of the storm. The 3 soldiers followed, stumbling, their world reduced to the vague shape of the person in front of them. The cold was a living thing, a predator that sank its fangs deep into their bones. Within 30 minutes, their confidence had been stripped away, leaving only a primal, gnawing fear. An hour into the trek, Diaz faltered. He tripped over a snow-covered rock and went down hard. He tried to get up, but his limbs felt heavy, disconnected. A creeping lethargy was dulling his thoughts. He was getting too cold. Instantly, Sharma was there. She hadn't seemed to look back, Yet she knew the exact moment he fell. She knelt beside him, a dark specter in the blizzard. She didn't offer a hand. Instead, she ripped open his parka, her movements brutally efficient. She pulled a chemical heat pack from her own gear, activated it with a sharp crack, and shoved it against his chest, directly over his heart. The sudden, intense warmth made him gasp. "You're going into shock," she stated, her voice muffled but clear through her mask. "Your body is shutting down. Breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow. Controlled." She pulled one of the silver tubes from his belt. "Eat this. Now." Diaz's gloved hands were clumsy, shaking. She took the tube, unscrewed the cap, and pushed the end to his lips. All of it. He squeezed the chalky, tasteless paste into his mouth, forcing himself to swallow. It was vile, but almost immediately, he felt a surge of warmth spread from his core. The fog in his brain began to recede. "On your feet, Diaz," Sharma commanded. She wasn't helping him up. She was ordering him. "The ground will kill you faster than the wind. Get up." He struggled, his muscles screaming, but he got up. "You focus on one thing," she said, her face inches from his. "The step in front of you. Nothing else. Not the cold. Not the wind. Not how tired you are. Just the next step. Then the one after that. Do you understand me?" Diaz nodded, his teeth chattering. "Good," she said, already turning away and resuming the pace. "Stay with me." They pushed on. Sharma navigated not by sight, there was nothing to see, but by some internal compass, some deep, instinctual understanding of the terrain. She read the subtle shifts in the wind, the texture of the snow under her feet. She was not just moving through the storm. She was a part of it. Hours bled into one another. Time lost all meaning. There was only the wind, the cold, the rhythmic crunch of snow, and the dark shape of Sharma leading them forward. Finally, she stopped. They had reached a massive rock formation, a granite wall that offered a slight reprieve from the wind's full force. "This is it," she said, her voice carrying over the gale. "They would have sought shelter here." She unslung the signal's booster from her pack. Her fingers, somehow still nimble in the crippling cold, worked with astonishing speed, unfolding the antenna, connecting the device to a power source, and tuning the frequency. Chun and Evans watched in awe. This was beyond any training they had ever received. She put an earpiece in. "The storm is creating too much interference for standard comms," she explained, her eyes scanning the device's small screen. "This unit doesn't transmit a voice signal. It searches for the faint electronic signature of a frozen radio's battery." She swept the antenna in a slow arc. The device was silent. The wind howled. Hope began to curdle into despair in the pit of Evans's stomach. They were too late. Then, a faint, rhythmic beep echoed in Sharma's earpiece. A tiny green light flickered on the screen. "Got them," she said, her voice devoid of triumph, a simple statement of fact. "There on the leeward side of this outcropping, in a snowdrift. They tried to dig in." She pointed. "Start digging." They clawed at the snow with their hands, their movements frantic. A few feet down, they hit something soft. It was the fabric of a parka. They dug faster, a desperate, adrenaline-fueled frenzy. They uncovered them one by one. For men, huddled together in a shallow snow cave, barely conscious. They were encased in ice, their faces blue, their breathing shallow and ragged. One of them, Sergeant Miller, had a crude splint on his leg, the bone clearly shattered. They were alive, but only just. The thin thread of their existence was about to snap. Sharma immediately took charge, her calm a stark contrast to the frantic energy of the others. She was no longer just a guide. She was a medic, and it was here, in the heart of the storm, surrounded by the dead and dying, that her true nature was revealed. "Diaz, get the plasma warmers ready. Chun, thermal blankets. Evans, with me." She knelt beside Sergeant Miller, the most critically injured. With a practiced hand, she cut away his trouser leg, exposing the mangled limb. The cold had prevented him from bleeding out, but his core temperature was plummeting. As she worked, her movements swift and sure, the sleeve of her thermal suit rode up her forearm. In the faint, ethereal glow of the blizzard, Corporal Evans saw it. First, the network of fine, silvery scars that crisscrossed her skin. And beneath them, a faded tattoo, intricate and stark. It was a pair of stylized wings wrapped around a caduceus, with a single unsheathed dagger piercing the center. Evans froze. His blood ran cold for a reason other than the temperature. He knew that symbol. His older brother, a ranger who had served in a dozen hellholes, had spoken of it in hushed, reverent tones. It was the insignia of a ghost unit, a legend whispered around campfires and in classified debriefings. Task Force Archangel. They weren't just medics. They were the absolute elite, a handful of operators sent into the most hostile conditions imaginable, often alone, to treat and extract high-value assets or critically wounded soldiers when no one else could. They were renowned for their medical skills, their survival expertise, and their lethality. They were ghosts who walked through fire to pull people out of hell. He looked from the tattoo on her arm to her face. Now illuminated by the glow of a medical scanner, she was running over Miller's chest. The quiet logistics sergeant. The woman Thorne had humiliated. The woman who counted boxes and filed requisitions. It was impossible. It was a lie. And yet, the truth was right there, inked into her skin. His voice was a dry, choked whisper, nearly lost in the wind. The Archangels? You were one of them. Sharma didn't look up. Her entire focus was on the injured man in front of her. Her fingers found his pulse, faint and thready. His heart rate is dangerously arrhythmic. He's in V-fib, she said, her voice a clinical, detached calm. Diaz, I need the portable defibrillator. Now, Evans, charge the paddles to 200 joules. The reveal was not a moment of glory. It wasn't a confession or a boast. It was an irrelevance, a piece of old data from a past life that had no bearing on the immediate life-or-death calculus of the present. Sergeant Miller was dying, and that was the only thing that mattered. Evans stared for another second, his mind reeling. He remembered another part of his brother's stories. Each Archangel had a call sign, a name they were known by in the field. He looked up at the name of the FOB, stenciled on the container's back at the base. Kestrel's Perch. And he remembered the call sign his brother had mentioned with particular awe. A medic so skilled at high-altitude operations they named her after a bird of prey that lived among the peaks. Kestrel. The realization hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He finally understood. They weren't on a mountain with a logistics sergeant. They were on a mountain with a legend. Paddles. Sharma's voice snapped him out of his trance. Evans moved, his body finally responding to the command, his respect for her crystallizing into something far deeper, something akin to pure, unadulterated awe. The journey back was a descent into a frozen hell, but it was a hell with a purpose. Sharma orchestrated the evacuation with the same terrifying efficiency she had displayed throughout. She showed them how to construct 2 makeshift sleds, known as litters, from their trekking poles and thermal blankets to transport the 2 most critical patients, including Sergeant Miller. Keep them insulated, she commanded, her voice a constant, steadying presence in the chaos. Their own body heat is gone. We are their furnace now. She divided the rescued and the rescuers into 2 teams. She took point, breaking the trail through the deepening snow, while Evans and Chan managed 1 litter, and Diaz, now fully recovered, handled the other with one of the less injured patrol members. The work was brutal, soul-crushing labor. Each step was a battle against the wind, the snow, and the mountain's crushing gravity. They were hauling dead weight, fighting for every single foot of progress. Hours into the return journey, the storm reached its zenith. The wind became a solid, immovable object, and the visibility dropped to the point where they could barely see their own feet. Chan, exhausted and disoriented, stumbled and lost his grip on the litter. It slid sideways, threatening to tumble into an unseen ravine. Before anyone could react, Sharma was there. She threw her body against the sled, her boots digging into the ice, arresting its slide with a grunt of raw effort. She was a fixed point in the hurricane. "We stop," she announced. "We'll be torn apart out here. We build." "Build what?" Evans yelled over the wind. "There's nothing here." "There is snow," she replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We build a snow cave. It will save our lives." Under her precise direction, they worked. She showed them how to find a deep, solid drift and dig into it, creating a tunnel that angled upwards to trap warm air. It was agonizing work. Their muscles burned. Their lungs screamed for oxygen in the thin air, but driven by her unyielding will, they dug. Within an hour, they had carved a small chamber out of the snowdrift, large enough to shelter all 8 of them. Once inside, the change was miraculous. The deafening roar of the wind subsided to a dull, distant moan. The temperature inside the cave, warmed by their collective body heat, was dramatically higher than the maelstrom outside. It was a pocket of life carved into the heart of a world of death. Sharma immediately went to work on the patients, checking vitals, administering saline drips, and redressing Miller's leg. She moved with a tireless, methodical energy. Evans, Diaz, and Chan watched her, their earlier arrogance a distant, shameful memory. They had been boys playing at being soldiers in the shadow of a true warrior. She had not only saved Miller's team, she had saved them from their own ignorance. She had shown them what real strength, real fortitude looked like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't boastful. It was quiet, relentless, and utterly competent. After what felt like an eternity, she sensed a subtle shift in the wind's pitch. "The storm is breaking," she announced. "The pressure is changing. We move in 10 minutes. The final leg of the journey was made in a strange, ethereal twilight as the blizzard receded, leaving behind a world sculpted in white. The wind had died down to a whisper, and the sky was a deep, star-dusted indigo. They stumbled back onto the perimeter of FOB Kestrel's perch like ghosts returning from the grave. The entire base was awake, watching. Figures emerged from tents and containers, their faces pale in the harsh glare of the floodlights. Major Davies stood at the front, his expression etched with a tension that broke into profound relief as he saw them approach. And beside him, his arm in a sling and his jaw a swollen, discolored mess, stood Captain Marcus Thorne. Sharma led the procession, her face caked with ice, her body moving with the stiff gait of utter exhaustion. But her head was high. Behind her, her small, battered team hauled the litters bearing the men they had pulled from the mountain's teeth. As Sharma walked past the assembled crowd, past the major, past the captain she had struck, something happened. Corporal Evans, without a word or a command, straightened his weary body and snapped to the fiercest, most rigid position of attention he had ever held. His gaze was fixed on Sharma, an expression of pure, undiluted reverence on his face. A moment later, Diaz and Chun did the same. It wasn't a formal salute drilled on a parade ground. It was a raw, spontaneous gesture of profound respect, an acknowledgement from one soldier to another that they were in the presence of something far greater than themselves. It was a silent, powerful testament to what she had done. The other soldiers on the base, sensing the weight of the moment, stood a little straighter. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of boots on snow and the labored breathing of the rescue team. Thorne watched it all, his arrogance stripped away, leaving him hollowed out. He saw the looks on his men's faces. He saw the rescued patrol, alive. He saw the woman he had tried to break, who had instead saved them all. His authority was a shattered ruin, rebuilt on a foundation of her competence. As she passed him, their eyes met for a brief second. Thorne gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was an apology. It was an admission of his failure. It was a concession of her absolute, undeniable superiority. Sharma didn't acknowledge him. Her mission wasn't finished. She continued walking, her focus entirely on getting her patients to the warmth and safety of the medical tent. Respect was not a destination for her. It was simply a byproduct of the work. Later that night, the world was still and silent. The storm had passed, leaving a sky so clear and cold it felt as if the stars might shatter and fall. The official report would list Captain Thorne's injury as a slip on the ice. The court-martial proceedings against Sergeant Sharma were quietly and permanently cancelled. Sharma was back in her element, the supply tent. The single bare bulb cast a pool of harsh yellow light, illuminating her as she worked. She wasn't doing inventory. She was tending to her own gear. Spread out on a clean canvas tarp was a set of equipment not found on any standard army manifest. A lightweight harness, coiled ropes of a strange, synthetic fiber, and a beautifully crafted, wickedly sharp ice axe. It was the personal toolkit of a master mountaineer. She sat on a crate, a whetstone in her hand, drawing it along the edge of the axe's blade with a steady, rhythmic motion. Shing, shing, shing. The sound was crisp and clean in the vast silence of the tent, a meditation in steel and stone. It was the sound of a professional maintaining her tools. The tent flap opened softly, and Corporal Evans stepped inside. He didn't speak. Words felt clumsy, inadequate. He had come to apologize, to try and explain, but seeing her there, so completely absorbed in her task, he knew it wasn't necessary. She didn't require his apology. Instead, he walked over to the corner where the rifles of Sergeant Miller's rescued team were leaning against a stack of crates. He picked up the first one. He took a cleaning kit from a pouch on his belt, pulled a clean rag from it, and began to meticulously break down and clean the weapon. He worked in silence, his movements deliberate, focused. He oiled the bolt, cleaned the barrel, and wiped down the stock, removing every trace of ice and grime from the blizzard. Sharma never looked up from her sharpening, but she was aware of his presence. The two of them worked in a shared, unspoken communion. He was not just cleaning rifles, he was paying tribute. He was helping her in her world, the world of quiet maintenance and preparation that underpins all successful operations. It was his way of saying thank you. It was his way of showing he finally understood. She finished with the axe, the edge now honed to a razor's sharpness. She tested it carefully against the calloused pad of her thumb, her expression unreadable. Satisfied, she wiped the blade clean and laid it gently back on the tarp. Then she picked up a coil of rope and began to inspect it inch by inch, her scarred, capable hands searching for any fray, any weakness, any imperfection. The quiet work continued under the solitary light, a silent testament to the simple, profound truth that respect is never given. It is always and only earned.